What if the man you loved booked a first-class trip for two to Paris, and your name wasn't on it? Have you ever stood in your own home and felt like a visitor? Have you ever sensed a shift you couldn't explain, but your heart already knew the truth? Celine Hargrove lived in a penthouse made of glass and silence. The night she found the boarding passes, both the glass and the silence cut her at once. Stay with this story. The moment she stepped off a plane the next day, her life took a turn she never expected. The tablet buzzed once on the nightstand. That soft vibration changed everything. Celine wasn't looking for proof of anything. She never searched bags. She never checked pockets. She lived in a marriage where she stayed quiet and trusted what she hoped was still there. But that morning, the tablet alarm sounded at the same second her phone did. She reached for hers and touched his by mistake. It unlocked. She froze. Not because she wanted to dig, but because the screen lit up with something she never saw coming. A confirmation email, 2 boarding passes, JFK to Paris, departure tomorrow morning. Passengers, Bron Hargrove and Sienna Durrell. There was no shock, only clarity, a numb kind of awareness that settled in her bones. Bron, her husband. Sienna, the woman who clung to him at events, who adjusted his tie as, if she had the right, who laughed at jokes Celine didn't find funny. Celine stared at the screen for a long moment. No tremble in her hands, no gasp, no tears. She set the tablet down. She walked to the bathroom. She turned on the warm water. She stepped into the shower and pressed her back against the wall, letting the heat pour over her shoulders. This was not the moment she broke. This was the moment she woke up. Their marriage once felt warm. He used to bring fresh croissants home because he knew she liked them warm. He once told her that her voice made his mornings softer. He once held her waist in the kitchen and said he wanted forever. Somewhere along the line, forever turned into something with conditions. He started working late, then later, then not at all beside her. The distance grew in quiet steps. Dinner turned into meetings. Meetings turned into trips. Trips turned into excuses. Europe needs me this quarter. The project is at a critical point. Sienna handles the travel. Don't worry. Sienna handled more than the travel. Celine felt it, but she refused to become a detective in her own home. She believed love should not require surveillance, but she also knew a drowning feeling when she felt one. It had been building for months, and the tablet gave the final push. She rinsed her hair, wrapped herself in a robe, and walked to the full-length mirror. She studied her own reflection, not searching for flaws, searching for truth. She had not lost herself. She had paused herself. There was a difference. She stepped out of the bathroom and walked into the bedroom. Bron was still asleep. His arm rested across her side of the bed, his breathing steady, his expression calm. He looked like a man who slept well at night, a man with nothing to fear, a man who knew his wife would be there, no matter what he hid. Celine stood there for several seconds, not out of longing, out of realization. He did not see her anymore, and she had allowed it for too long. But the silence had ended, not with shouting, not with thrown clothes or slammed doors. It ended with a boarding pass. She turned away from him and left the room, leaving the lights off. She wanted darkness. Darkness told the truth. She walked toward the kitchen, her footsteps soft on the hardwood floor. She poured herself a glass of water and held it with both hands. Her pulse steadied. Her thoughts aligned into something simple and firm. She needed to breathe somewhere else, somewhere that didn't hold her memories. Somewhere he didn't expect her to go. Paris was no longer a trip for him. It was a reset for her. She set the glass down, walked to the guest room, opened the closet, pulled out the small suitcase she hadn't touched in years. She placed it on the bed, opened it, and for the first time in months, she packed with intention, not obligation. 2 dresses, comfortable shoes, a coat, a simple scarf she loved, skincare she never skipped, a single pair of earrings. She didn't pack pain. She didn't pack questions. She didn't pack her wedding photo. That stayed behind. She stood beside the suitcase, breathing slow and steady. Tomorrow morning, he would board a luxurious flight thinking she was home, ignorant and quiet. But she would be in the air too. Not behind him, not chasing him, not trying to confront him. She would be on her own plane, headed to the same city, but walking toward a different future. He was going to Paris for a lie. She was going to Paris for her life. Bron stirred once just after 3 a.m. His hand reached across the bed and felt cool fabric instead of his wife's skin. He didn't flinch, didn't sit up, didn't wonder. He rolled over and pulled the blanket higher, sinking deeper into sleep like nothing was missing. But something was. Celine hadn't been beside him for hours. She sat on the long sofa in the guest room, wrapped in a soft throw blanket. That did nothing to stop the chill from setting into her chest. Her knees were pulled up, her arms crossed. She hadn't moved, not since she packed. The penthouse was quiet, but inside her, something was loud. Her own pulse. Steady, focused. She stared straight ahead at the black TV screen. In the reflection, she could see herself, small, still, but no longer confused. 6 years ago, Bron used to call her his anchor. He said she was his calm in a brutal world. She memorized that line, let it shape how she served the marriage. When he got busier, she didn't complain. When he grew colder, she gave him space. When he stopped asking about her day, she convinced herself he was just tired. But tonight, all of that looked like excuses. She hadn't been a wife lately. She'd been furniture, there, quiet, functional, forgotten. And the worst part, she let it happen. She placed both feet flat on the floor and stood. The suitcase waited by the door. The boarding pass confirmation sat in her inbox. Her flight left exactly 2 hours after Bron's. Same day, same city, different purpose. He was going to Paris to entertain someone who made him feel alive. She was going to Paris to become someone who felt alive again. At 4:45 a.m., she moved through the kitchen slowly. The coffee machine hissed. The scent filled the space, sharp and bitter, just how she liked it. She poured a single cup, opened the window, and let the cold air hit her bare face. The city hadn't fully woken up, but she had. She sipped in silence, watching the skyline soften as the sky turned from deep blue to light grey. The last time she had stood at this window with a plan was the day Bron proposed. Now, she stood here again, not waiting for a ring, but reclaiming her name. She took a photo of the boarding passes, not his, hers, not to post, not to send, just to remind herself that she'd done this, that she'd made a move, that she didn't freeze when her world cracked. The bedroom door opened upstairs. She heard footsteps, Bron's, slow and careless. He entered the kitchen, adjusting his watch, still shirtless. He didn't even see the suitcase by the door, didn't ask why she was dressed this early, didn't notice the faint makeup on her face or the perfume she hadn't worn in weeks. He kissed the side of her head casually. "You're up early," he mumbled, then turned away and grabbed his protein bar from the fridge. She sipped her coffee and said nothing. Let him think she was going to yoga. Let him believe she'd still be here when he came back. Let him keep living in the illusion that she was his, quietly, endlessly his. He had no idea that when his plane touched down in Paris, she'd already be there, 2 floors below, different room, different reason. He walked out of the kitchen, humming softly as he checked his watch again. She waited until she heard the elevator doors close. Then she picked up her carry-on, took one last look around, and whispered into the empty room, "I'm not leaving you. I'm leaving this version of me." The terminal buzzed with the energy of too many languages and not enough space. People tugged luggage in every direction, chased boarding times, and tried to get comfortable in uncomfortable shoes. But Celine didn't move with rush. She moved with purpose. Her feet ached. Her heart didn't. She stepped through immigration with nothing but a passport, a calm voice, and the name Celine Hargrove printed clearly on her customs form. The same name Bron's mistress probably rolled her eyes at. Her flight had landed 2 hours after his. She knew they were here already. probably upstairs in the penthouse suite, probably sipping espresso or pretending the affair was something noble. She didn't care. She wasn't here to watch. She was here to leave that version of herself behind. The line for taxis outside the terminal moved slowly, but Celine didn't check her phone. She stood with both hands resting on her carry-on. Her scarf had shifted slightly, and a strand of hair stuck to her lip. She didn't adjust it. The cold Paris air greeted her like an old friend. Crisp, honest, not pretending to be warm. When it was her turn, the cab driver stepped out with a silent nod, took her bag, and loaded it into the trunk. "Rue de Rivoli," she said softly. "Hotel Billionaire." He nodded again. No small talk, just Paris. As they pulled away from the airport, the city began to rise around her. Buildings with age and pride, streets tight with history, and storefronts that didn't beg for attention. This wasn't a city made for people like Bron, though men like him always tried to claim it. This was a city built for those who moved with quiet confidence. She rolled down the window slightly. The air was real. It tasted like steel and butter. The Hotel Billionaire came into view after 30 minutes. It looked exactly how she remembered. Grand without being loud. Gold trim around tall windows. Fresh flowers outside the entrance. Staff that remembered your name without needing to say it back to you. Bron had brought her here once. On a whim. He said, every woman should wake up to this view at least once. What she woke up to was him stepping out to take a call from the team. Which she now realized likely included Sienna, even back then. But this time, she had booked the room herself. No view, no penthouse, no add-ons. Just a clean bed, a window, a door she could close behind her without asking for permission. Inside, the lobby smelled like jasmine and polished stone. The receptionist greeted her with a familiar, practiced smile. "Madame Hargrove, welcome back," he said. "We're happy to have you again." He didn't know. Or maybe he did. People who worked in hotels saw everything. She smiled politely. The concierge appeared beside him with a tray. "Would you care for a welcome drink?" A glass of rose sparkled under the chandelier light. She didn't hesitate. She took it. "Merci. Your room is ready. 3rd floor, right side. Not the suite. Not even close." And still, it felt like freedom. Room 312 was quiet. Small, but not suffocating. The bed was a low king with crisp sheets. The window opened outward, showing a slim slice of the street below. There was no view of the Eiffel Tower, no gold-trimmed mirrors, no over-designed furniture. But there was honesty in the simplicity. She dropped her carry-on near the closet and sat at the edge of the bed. The mattress gave slightly, not soft, not hard, just real. She let her shoulders fall, her head tilt back. The air inside the room was warm, but not heavy. It didn't hold the weight of unspoken fights or polite lies. It just let her be. She kicked off her shoes, unwrapped the scarf from her neck, pulled her phone from her coat and turned it over in her hands. No new messages, no missed calls. Bron hadn't noticed her absence yet. Or worse, he had, and didn't care. She opened the camera app, flipped to the front-facing lens, looked at herself. Her eyes looked tired, but not broken. Her lips looked soft, but firm. Her expression, her own. She took a picture. No smile. Just a timestamp. Proof of the moment she returned to herself. She stepped to the window and opened it wide. The city air rushed in. Bread, gasoline, cigarette smoke, perfume, life. Across the street, a woman in a trench coat pulled a child forward gently by the wrist. The boy dragged his feet, laughing. A man crossed behind them on a bike with a bag of baguettes swinging from his shoulder. Paris didn't slow for pain. Paris didn't care who cheated on whom. It just kept moving. And Celine liked that. She sat at the small desk beside the window and opened the leather-bound notepad the hotel provided. She clicked the pen. No plan, no bullet points. She wrote one sentence. "This city owes me nothing, but I'm going to leave here owning myself." She didn't unpack. She didn't call anyone. She didn't cry. She lay back across the bed and stared at the ceiling until the weight of the flight finally caught up with her. And when she finally slept, she didn't dream about Bron. She dreamt of peace. The scent of lavender drifted from the hallway as Celine stepped out of room 312. Her hair was loosely pinned. Her dress, navy satin, simple but shaped to her body, clung softly at the waist. She hadn't worn it since their 3rd anniversary dinner in Miami. He never noticed then. She wore it now for herself. Paris had begun to light up. The streets glowed amber, and people walked as if time moved differently here, slower, freer. She didn't call for a driver. She didn't ask for recommendations. She walked. Her heels clicked against the stone sidewalk, steady and unbothered. No destination, just instinct. She passed bakeries that stayed open late, a boutique florist folding up its awning, and 3 couples, all lost in each other. She didn't envy them. She didn't long. She simply noticed. Rue Montorgueil appeared like a painting from memory. Golden lights strung between narrow buildings, restaurant signs etched in, soft brush strokes, the clink of wine glasses, the hush of conversation. Celine slowed as a bistro caught her eye. Small, cozy. Half the tables were full, the other half waited. A hostess appeared, barely older than 20. "Bonsoir, madame. Table for one?" Celine smiled. Yes. For one, she was seated outside. A small table, 1 chair, flickering candle. The chill pressed gently against her arms. She welcomed it. Menus weren't handed here. They were spoken. The waiter approached, offered a warm smile, and listed the day's offerings with a gentle accent. Celine nodded politely and pointed to a dish she remembered liking years ago. She hadn't eaten alone in public in years. At first, she felt the eyes, or maybe imagined them. A woman, alone, in a city of pairs. But that feeling dissolved as soon as the first bite touched her tongue. Warm, creamy, honest, no pretense, no performance, just a meal. For her, she sipped her wine slowly, breathing between tastes, letting her body settle. And that's when a shadow paused beside her table. "Excuse me," a voice, warm, clear, measured. She looked up. A man, late 30s maybe, tall, European-cut coat, light scruff along his jaw, dark hair, sharp eyes that held no arrogance. "You look like someone trying to remember how to breathe," he said gently. She raised a brow. "Is that a compliment?" He smiled. "It's an observation." There was no flirtation in his tone, no pressure, just a calm presence standing in front of her, like someone who noticed what others ignored. "I'm Kalen," he said. "I don't mean to interrupt. I was just..." "Drawn," Celine tilted her head. "Drawn to the stillness," he said. She studied him. "I don't usually share dinners with strangers." "Neither do I," he replied. "Which is why I'll walk away now if you ask." She paused, then gestured lightly toward the empty chair. "1 drink," she said. He sat. They didn't trade life stories. They didn't talk about where they worked or what they earned. They spoke about food, color, places, silence. He was in Paris for an art exhibit. From Marseille, not in tech, not in real estate, not on vacation, just visiting friends and filling his notebook with sketches. He noticed things, like how she twirled her wine stem once before each sip, like how she listened without interrupting. And when she laughed, a short, surprised laugh, he didn't stare. He smiled back, like it was a privilege to hear it. She didn't mention Bron. He didn't ask about the rings on her finger. The moment didn't belong to anything outside the table. Dinner ended too soon. They hadn't even touched dessert. She stood. He stood with her. He didn't offer to walk her all the way back, just to the end of the street. The city whispered around them. Buses hissed by. Lamps buzzed overhead. Lovers leaned into doorways. They walked slowly. He didn't touch her. He didn't ask if he could. At the hotel door, she paused. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" For not filling the silence, Kaylin smiled. Sometimes silence is the most honest language. She hesitated, then extended her hand. He didn't kiss her cheek, didn't ask for her number. He simply turned her hand palm up and kissed the back of it. No rush, no angle, no hint, just respect. "Sleep well, Celine," he said. And he walked away. She stood at the hotel door a full minute before going inside. Her heart didn't race. It didn't ache either. It felt settled. She walked to the elevator, watched the floors tick upward. No Bron, no confrontation, no pain, just her. Have you ever healed in silence, not with rage, not with revenge, but with peace? If you've ever chosen dignity over drama, tell us below. Leave a comment. Share this with someone who needed to walk away quietly. And subscribe, because some stories don't scream to be heard. They whisper and still move mountains. The sun hit her face before the alarm did. Celine blinked into the soft morning light that poured in through the open window. Paris had woken up, but without urgency. Church bells rang in the distance, muffled by wind. Distant chatter mixed with the clink of breakfast dishes from the cafe across the street. She stretched without thinking. Her limbs moved freely. Her neck didn't feel tense. Her breath came easy. It took a full minute before she remembered where she was and why. And still, no panic followed, just awareness. She was in Paris, alone, by choice, and the man she married was somewhere above her, likely sitting beside the woman who didn't bother hiding anymore. She showered slowly, letting the heat fog the mirror and soften the edges of her thoughts. She didn't plan to see them. She didn't plan to avoid them either. She would live her morning without anticipation, without strategy. She wore white linen pants and a cream blouse. Simple earrings, a loose braid. She looked like someone who hadn't been crying, because she hadn't. Grief didn't come in waves anymore. It came in clarity, and that was easier to live with. At 8:42 a.m., she took the elevator up to the rooftop. She didn't know why. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe she wanted confirmation. Maybe she needed the ache to show itself one last time, so she could let it go completely. The rooftop cafe was quiet but already filling. Couples leaned into their tables, waiters moved quickly but gently, and the skyline stretched in all directions. Celine scanned the tables without turning her head. And then she saw them. 2 floors above where she'd slept. Bron, in a dark grey suit, sienna, red lips, sunglasses in her hair like a crown. She leaned close, too close for polite conversation. He didn't pull away. He laughed at something she whispered. She touched his chest when the waiter brought croissant. Celine stayed in the doorway. They hadn't seen her, and she didn't want them to. She didn't flinch, didn't cry, didn't even frown. She just watched. 10 seconds, then 30, a full minute. Then 10 more. It was enough. She turned, walked back to the elevator, pressed the button. No tremble in her hands, no tears on her cheeks. Just a still, full decision settling into her chest like a final breath. Downstairs, she walked into the breakfast lounge on her floor. The server offered her a smile and gestured to a quiet corner table. She sat with her back to the window. She didn't want the view. She wanted the moment. A moment where she chose a table for one, chose coffee without remembering how he liked his, chose a croissant without imagining she'd share it. She bit into the pastry, closed her eyes, and let the flake crumble against her tongue. She checked her phone out of habit. Nothing. No missed calls. No messages. No updates from Bron. Not even a check-in. He still didn't know she was here. Or maybe he did. And it didn't matter. Either way, she had proof now. Not in the form of photos or recordings, but in her own eyes. She saw it. She saw him, saw the truth, and made no sound. That was power. As she sipped her coffee, her phone buzzed once. Unknown number. She frowned. Answered. "Bonjour, madame," a voice said. "This is Etienne, from Gallery Reverie. Kaylin left your name and said you might be interested in attending our preview this evening. Would that interest you?" She blinked. Yes, I would. Wonderful. You're on the list. Doors open at 7. Casual attire is welcome. She thanked him, hung up, and stared at her reflection in the black screen. Kaelan had mentioned an exhibit. He hadn't said anything about adding her name, but he had, not because he needed to impress her, but because he noticed her. She finished her coffee slowly, then stood. No rush, no plan, just presence. She spent the rest of the afternoon wandering, not to kill time, but to feel time. Her feet carried her through narrow streets lined with bookstores, tiny, cheese shops, and flower carts that spilled color across the sidewalk. She walked into stores without needing anything, stood before paintings in windows, and watched people speak a language she didn't understand and didn't need to. Nobody here knew who she was. Nobody looked at her as Bron Hargrove's wife. They didn't see her as anything but a woman alone, walking through the city with her shoulders back and her silence intact. That was enough. By 6:45 p.m., she was back in her hotel room. She stood in front of the mirror with 2 dresses laid across the bed. One, black, fitted, elegant. The other, soft teal, flowing, mid-length. She chose the teal. She wore it without shapewear, without heels, just sandals and a thin bracelet. No necklace, no effort to impress. When she stepped out of the elevator at the gallery address, a staff member greeted her by name and offered her a glass of wine before she even said hello. The gallery was tucked inside an old building off Rue des Archives. Minimalist, white walls, soft gold lighting. The kind of place where nothing shouted but everything spoke. She moved slowly, letting the art come to her. The third painting stopped her. A woman stood alone at a window. Her shoulders curled slightly inward, but her gaze was sharp. Not desperate, not broken. Just waiting. The strokes were deliberate. The colors muted but deep. Silvers, blues, faint traces of rust. Celine leaned in. Something about the curve of the woman's back, the tension in her hand, the stillness in the way her feet didn't quite touch the rug. It was her, not literally, not painted, but spiritually. That was her, months ago, in her kitchen, in her silence, in her stillness. That wasn't peace, but paralysis. Most people don't stay long on this one, a voice said behind her. Too uncomfortable. She turned. Kaelan. He wore no tie, no statement, just a navy button-down, sleeves rolled. Hair slightly messy. Posture relaxed. I didn't know you were curating, she said. I'm not, he replied, but I know the artist, and I knew you'd stand here. She raised an eyebrow. You always this sure of yourself? No, just sure when something's obvious. She didn't smile, but her shoulders dropped slightly. He stepped beside her. They looked at the painting in silence for another minute. Then she said, "That used to be me." He glanced sideways. And now, she met his eyes. Now I don't wait at the window. They drifted toward the back of the room. The wine was softer here, the lights warmer. A quiet trio played low jazz on upright bass and piano. They didn't talk much, didn't need to. The kind of comfort between them didn't ask for performance. She didn't tell him about the rooftop, didn't mention Sienna's hand on Bron's chest. It wasn't relevant here. What mattered was how he listened when she spoke, how he didn't fill pauses, how he never asked for a story she didn't offer. I didn't think I'd feel anything in Paris, she said softly. What do you feel? She tilted her head, like I took off something heavy I didn't know I was wearing. He nodded once, then looked down at her bracelet. That's the same one from dinner. She blinked. You noticed that? I notice a lot more than you think. They left the gallery side by side, walking into the cooler air of night. No one reached for the other. They walked without pressure, without agenda. At the hotel door, she stopped. He didn't ask, didn't lean, didn't linger too long. He simply said, "Thank you for tonight." She met his gaze. For what? For showing up. He turned, hands in his pockets, and walked down the sidewalk, unhurried. Celine stood at the door for a full minute. then walked inside. Her phone buzzed. Text from Bron. Everything okay? Haven't heard from you. She turned off the screen. She would answer. Eventually. But not tonight. Tonight, she had chosen herself. The lobby smelled of bergamot and old stone, familiar but neutral, like nothing had changed. Celine stepped out of the elevator wearing an ivory dress that flowed slightly at the hem, with flat nude sandals and no jewelry. Her hair was down. Light makeup, soft blush, no lipstick. There was no effort to impress anyone, but everyone noticed her anyway, especially him. Bron stood just past the concierge desk. Dark tailored suit, loafers polished, a phone in one hand, a coffee cup in the other. He looked up casually, then stopped. Their eyes met. Time didn't slow. Nothing dramatic happened. But something inside him jolted, because her presence no longer felt like something he owned. It felt like something he couldn't reach. He blinked once. His grip tightened slightly around the coffee cup. He said nothing. His lips parted like he might, but she didn't give him the space. She walked past him. Calm. Quiet. Unbothered. He turned slightly, unsure if he was supposed to follow, unsure if he'd imagined her altogether. But she had seen enough in the last 48 hours to know how to hold her expression still. Sienna wasn't beside him. The hallway to the upper suites was empty. And still, Celine didn't slow. She stepped into the waiting elevator, turned, faced him. Just before the doors closed, she tilted her head slightly and offered him the softest, most unreadable smile. Not a smirk, not a challenge, just acknowledgement. Then the doors slid shut, and Bron was left standing in the lobby with nothing but a half-drunk cup of coffee and the realization that he'd never seen her like this before. Back upstairs, she exhaled. Not from fear, not from adrenaline, from closure. There was no scene, no fight. No, how could you? Just her walking taller than she ever had while he stood speechless. That, she decided, was enough. That evening, the city hummed beneath her window. Celine sat on the edge of the bed in her robe, hair damp from a late shower. She wasn't tired, just still. The kind of still that came after a shift, not before one. She thought about the look on Bron's face, how unreadable she had become to him. It hadn't been revenge. It wasn't even satisfaction. It was the simple knowing that she had finally moved beyond him, and he saw it too late. A knock at the door. Soft. 2 taps. She stood, cautious but not startled. When she opened it, Kaelan stood there. Black sweater, clean lines, a small paper bag in one hand and a bottle of something gold in the other. "I didn't call," she said quietly. "No," he replied, "but you looked like someone who might skip dinner." She stepped aside without answering. He entered without pressing. He set the bag on the desk. 2 pastries, a wedge of soft cheese, a small container of olives, a baguette already sliced, and what looked like apricot jam. "From the market near Rue Claire," he said. "Is this a peace offering?" "No, it's just food. For a woman who's probably had enough noise this week." She raised an eyebrow. "You assume a lot." "I observe," he corrected. He poured 2 glasses, one for her, one for himself, and sat across from her at the small corner table. No music, no questions. They ate slowly. He let her take her time. After a while, she spoke. "I saw him this morning." Kaelan didn't shift, didn't lean in, just listened. He was in the lobby, alone. I think he was surprised. I don't know if he was angry or ashamed or nothing at all. "Do you care?" Kaelan asked, voice low. Celine paused, then shook her head. "No, I cared for too long. That's why I stayed numb." He nodded. "And now?" She breathed out. "Now I'm tired of waiting to feel better, so I'm choosing to feel different." They didn't talk about Bron after that. Instead, they talked about how apricots used to be her favorite fruit as a girl, and how he learned to paint in his grandmother's backyard under grapevines, and how some cities let you be invisible without making you feel erased. She didn't check the time. She didn't feel watched. She felt seen. When the meal ended, he stood. "I should let you rest," he said gently. She walked him to the door. "Thank you," she said, "for bringing the things I didn't know I needed." His hand lifted, almost to touch her cheek, then stopped, respectful. "May I?" he asked. She didn't answer with words. She leaned forward and rested her forehead lightly against his. Not a kiss, not quite, just closeness, breath, space shared. He pulled back an inch. "You don't have to be brave all at once." Her eyes met his. I'm just here." He nodded, and then he left. She locked the door, walked back to the table, poured one more inch of wine into her glass and stood barefoot at the window. She didn't toast to closure. She didn't toast to Bron. She didn't toast to healing. She simply sipped and smiled. The next morning, she returned to the rooftop, not to spy, not to check, to reclaim a view that no longer belonged to pain. Celine stepped out of the elevator at 8:15 a.m. The air was crisp, sunlight bright but not blinding. A light breeze moved the white cloth napkins as waiters reset tables from the early breakfast rush. She wore a pale blue blouse, soft denim, flat sandals, hair in a loose knot. No makeup, no need. The maitre d' recognized her but didn't question her presence. He simply guided her to a small table near the railing, away from the main walkway but with full view of the upper terrace. She ordered an espresso and a fruit plate, nothing fancy, and she waited. Not for them, for herself. 15 minutes passed. She didn't look toward the sweets. She sipped slowly. She ate. She watched the pigeons dance along the rail and the skyline stretch beyond the river. She felt still. Then, from the corner of her eye, movement. Sienna. Bright red dress, hair blown out, loud laugh before the table even settled. Bron followed. No tie. Sunglasses. His voice was low, unreadable, but his hand rested on her back with the kind of ease only two people with secrets carry. Celine didn't flinch. She didn't freeze. Sienna didn't notice her right away. Bron did. He looked up in mid-sentence. His mouth stopped moving. His hand slid off Sienna's back. Celine met his gaze. Not for long. Not to challenge. Just enough. A steady look that said, "I see you." And then she turned back to her plate. She didn't rush her bites. She didn't reach for her phone. She didn't give him another second of her attention. And when Sienna finally glanced her way and stiffened slightly, Celine didn't offer her even that courtesy. Some people you forgive by forgetting, others by simply no longer reacting. Her bill arrived. She signed it without looking at the amount. As she stood to leave, she adjusted her blouse calmly, gathered her bag, and walked down the path, the same path Bron and Sienna now occupied. And when she passed their table, she didn't pause. But Bron did. He turned his head again, as if to speak. She didn't look. She walked right past. No word, no insult, no hesitation. Just a quiet final exit from the version of herself who once cried in that man's arms. The sidewalk welcomed her like an old friend. Celine didn't walk fast. She wasn't rushing from anything. She moved like someone who knew exactly where her boundaries were and no longer needed to defend them. As she exited the hotel, she didn't check her phone. She didn't look back. She didn't wonder if Bron was watching. He'd seen enough. She turned right onto a quieter street, shoes tapping softly over uneven stones. A small bell above a storefront door chimed as she passed. She paused, looked in. Art supplies, vintage, clean shelves, real brushes, earth-tone paints stacked like quiet soldiers across white wood counters. She pushed the door open. Inside, it smelled like paper and lemon oil. The shopkeeper nodded from behind the register, mid-conversation with a teenager asking about sketch pads. Celine drifted. She used to paint, not for galleries, not for attention, just to breathe. Before Bron. Before gala dresses and frozen dinners eaten in silence. Before her life became about keeping up an image that never looked like her. Her fingers grazed a box of watercolor tubes. She held them gently. Noticed the shades: ochre, charcoal grey, midnight green. Colour had always made her feel alive. She picked up a set, then brushes, then a notebook. Not fancy, just soft-bound, thick paper. She took it all to the counter. The shopkeeper looked at her kindly. "You paint?" "Not lately," she said. "But I used to." "Then you still do." She stepped back into the street with a small bag in hand and a fresh feeling she hadn't expected. Anticipation. Not for confrontation, not for revenge, for herself, the way a person might feel before writing again after too long, or before singing softly to a song no one else could hear. She wasn't fixing anything. She was picking something up. She walked for another 20 minutes through Le Marais, ducking into a tiny cafe to grab an espresso to go. She found a bench at the edge of a narrow plaza, far from traffic, and sat in the sun. Her phone buzzed. She checked the screen. "Kaylin. Found something you might like. Meet me at Pont des Arts. No pressure." She stared at the message for a moment. No hearts, no demands, no expectations. She typed back, "Celine, give me 15 minutes. The Pont des Arts was quieter than she remembered. No street performers, just light footsteps. A few couples, 2 teens laughing loudly near the railing. Kaylin leaned against the far end of the bridge, a small folded bag in one hand. When he saw her, he stood straighter, but didn't wave. She liked that about him. Nothing exaggerated, nothing loud. When she reached him, he handed her the bag. "Bread," he said, "from that place near the dome. You said yesterday you missed real crust." She smiled. "You remembered?" "I remember quiet things. They stick better." They walked halfway across before stopping, leaning against the railing, watching the water. She pulled the bread out, cracked the crust gently. Warm steam floated out. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out 2 tiny packets of soft cheese. "No knife," he said. "So, uncivilized sharing?" She laughed quietly. "I've done worse." They broke bread, literally, ate in silence. The wind moved her braid against her shoulder. He watched the way she tucked it back behind her ear, with no self-consciousness. "You're different today," he said. "How?" "Lighter. Still quiet, but the weight shifted." She nodded. "I finally saw him." Kaylin said nothing. He let her continue when she was ready. He was with her. Rooftop breakfast. She laughed. He leaned in. A pause. "He saw me. I didn't stop." Kaylin looked over the river. That's the kind of moment people rehearse 1,000 times in their heads. "I didn't," she said. "And I didn't need to." He turned to face her. "You sure you don't want closure?" Celine shook her head slowly. "Closure isn't about getting answers. It's about knowing you'd ask different questions now anyway." They didn't walk back right away. They stood at the railing, side by side. No touching, no pressure. "Tell me something," she said after a while. "Anything. Do you believe some things happen just so you can finally let go of something else?" "I think some people show up not to save you," he said, "but to remind you you weren't broken in the first place." She looked at him. He didn't mean himself. He wasn't posturing. He wasn't angling for credit. He just meant that kind of person. And he let her decide whether he was one of them. Back at the hotel, they paused outside the lobby doors. "I should work a little tonight," she said. "Sketch, paint. Try something that's not talking. I'll bring something for the background," he offered. "Music? Wine?" She nodded once. "Room 312. Give me an hour." That night, as the city glowed behind her curtain, Celine laid a blank page across the desk. No outlines, no ideas, just a brush, just her, just the beginning. Bron Hargrove was used to control. He built his empire on it. Timing, power, leverage, presence. He knew when to walk into a boardroom, how long to hold a silence, and what kind of eye contact shut down opposition. But for the last 30 to 6 hours, he felt something unfamiliar. Looseness, not in his grip, in his certainty. He hadn't seen Celine since the lobby. He expected a message, a confrontation, a hotel checkout, something. Instead, She disappeared, except she hadn't. She was still there, 2 floors down, and she didn't come to him. She didn't ask where he'd been. She didn't fight for him. She didn't even ask why. That unsettled him more than shouting would have. Sienna sensed it too. Over breakfast, over wine, in the bedroom. She noticed when he stopped answering mid-sentence, eyes drifting toward the window. She noticed his phone stayed face up, that he wasn't present, not fully. And Bron hated when he wasn't the one pulling focus. By early afternoon, he walked the hallway to the concierge desk, asked if Celine had checked out. The answer, no. She extended her stay by 1 more night, sir. He nodded once. Thank you. Then he turned and walked toward the elevator. He didn't press her floor number. He went back to his suite. Meanwhile, 2 floors below, Celine rinsed a brush and let deep grey drip across a fresh page. The first sketch had taken hours. The second, minutes. Her hand wasn't rusty. Her eye was sharp. The image wasn't of Bron or Kaelin or herself. It was of a woman walking forward while a man stood behind her, blurred. She didn't plan it. It just came. She didn't stop to explain it. She had music playing from her phone. Soft French vocals. No lyrics she could translate, but the tone fit the air. It wasn't trying to lift her mood. It was simply there, like the breeze or the smell of turpentine. A knock at the door. Not urgent, not hesitant, just there. She wiped her hands on a towel and opened it. Kaelin stood there, wine in one hand, 2 plastic glasses in the other. You didn't answer your phone, he said. She blinked. I didn't hear it. Good. That means you were doing something worth getting lost in. She stepped aside. He set the wine on the desk, looked at the sketch still drying on the table. He didn't ask what it meant, didn't guess, didn't flatter. He just nodded. You've been holding that image for a while. She didn't reply, just uncorked the wine. They sat on the floor, back against the bed. Music, low, glasses half full. At one point, he glanced at her hand, the wedding ring still on her finger. She noticed. I'll take it off when it stops feeling like armor. He didn't reach for it, didn't touch her hand. Take your time, he said. Some things don't come off all at once. They didn't kiss then. They didn't lean. But they sat close, and that, in itself, was more intimate than anything she'd felt in years. The wine bottle rested empty on the windowsill. The glasses sat half-drained on the floor. Paris, outside, flickered like a soft whisper. Inside, the quiet between Celine and Kaelin wasn't awkward. It was earned. She leaned back, knees folded beneath her, fingers loosely interlaced over her lap. Kaelin sat close, legs stretched out, shoulder brushing the edge of the nightstand. He wasn't in a rush. He wasn't calculating distance. He was there, exactly where she needed him to be. You look lighter, he said. Celine didn't respond immediately. She looked at the sketch across the desk, still drying, lines bold and unbothered. I feel less small. Kaelin turned his head, resting it against the wall. You were never small. You were quiet. There's a difference? Yes, he said. Small needs saving. Quiet just needs space. She met his eyes. Thank you, she whispered. For what? For seeing the space and not trying to fill it. Minutes passed. Music continued, one of those drifting guitar tracks that sounds like memory. She glanced at him again. Why haven't you kissed me? His eyes didn't widen. He didn't lean in with sudden drama. I was waiting. For what? For you to be here. She took a slow breath. I am. He shifted. Not quickly, not with hunger. With clarity, he moved closer, closing the 2-foot distance without collapsing it too fast. When his hand reached for her cheek, he didn't grip. He brushed, the softest touch across her jawline. Is this okay? She nodded once, and he kissed her. It wasn't like the movies. No sudden music swell, no desperation. It was slow, real, measured. It was the kind of kiss that didn't demand. It offered, and Celine let herself receive it, She didn't grip his shirt or press into him. She simply tilted her face slightly, opened her lips just enough, and melted. For the first time in months, not from pain, but from permission. Permission to be soft, to be wanted, to be untouched by performance. When he pulled back, their foreheads stayed close. She didn't open her eyes for a second, then whispered, "That didn't feel like a kiss." "No?" It felt like something that listened. Kalen smiled. "Good." He stood after a moment. No groaning, no dragging it out, no trying to stay. "I'll let you rest." She nodded. At the door, he paused. "If you want me to stop coming by, say so." "I don't." He nodded again, and left. Celine sat back on the bed, fingers resting against her lips. Not to replay the kiss, but to remember how safe she felt during it. Meanwhile, 2 floors above, Bron stared at his screen. Still no messages, still no exit from her. Sienna was asleep, makeup smudged across the pillow she refused to share. Her red dress lay draped over the armchair. Her presence filled the room, but not in the way Celine's absence used to. Bron didn't want a fight. He wanted her silence back. The problem was, it no longer belonged to him. Bron paced the hotel suite like a man looking for something he couldn't name. It wasn't his cufflinks. It wasn't his charger. It wasn't even his next business call. It was her. Not Celine as she'd once been, quiet, available, careful with his moods, but the version she became, untouchable, unbothered, unreadable, and he couldn't stand it. He hadn't texted again since the short message she never answered. He told himself it was dignity, but deep down he hoped she'd reach out first. She didn't. So now, 3 days into the Paris trip, Sienna asleep in his bed again, Bron finally broke his own rule. He asked the concierge if Celine had made dinner reservations. "Yes, Mr. Hargrove," the man said politely. Miss Celine confirmed a table for 1 this evening at Café du Lune, just across from Pont Neuf. Bron nodded like it was nothing. Understood. "Thank you," but inside, something flared. She wasn't hiding. She wasn't asking to be noticed. And somehow, that stung worse than an argument. Celine had chosen Café du Lune because of the lighting. Soft lanterns, minimal foot traffic, a waiter who remembered her from last fall when she stopped by during an afternoon walk. That visit had been brief, forgettable. This one wasn't. She sat at a two-top by the window, sketchbook open beside her wine glass, her pasta half finished, her phone face down. She wore black tonight. Not dramatic, just clean. No jewelry, no heels. Just herself, centered. She didn't see him at first, but she felt the presence shift. Bron stood by the entrance, wearing that same tailored control in his posture. He walked to her table like it belonged to him. She looked up as he reached her. "May I sit?" She closed her sketchbook. "I don't think that's a good idea," she said quietly. "I'm not here to fight." "I know," she said. "That's what makes this harder." He glanced around, as if embarrassed. "I just want 5 minutes." Celine took a sip of wine. "You had years." That stilled him. He sat, anyway. The waiter appeared. Bron waved him off. "I didn't know you were coming to Paris," he started. "I didn't come for you." He leaned forward slightly. "So, what is this?" "This," she said clearly, "is me. Not being yours anymore." He swallowed hard. "You didn't say goodbye." "I didn't say anything," she said, "because nothing I say matters to you unless it threatens your image." "That's not fair." She raised a brow. "You're right, it's not fair. But it's true." Silence stretched. Bron's fingers fidgeted near his glass. "Celine, I was never trying to hurt you. You just weren't trying to protect me either." He nodded slowly. "So is this it?" "This was over long before Paris," she said. "You're just now seeing it." He looked down, then up again. "Are you with someone?" She didn't answer right away. He took that as confirmation. "I see." She folded her napkin. "I'm not asking for understanding, Bron. I don't need your blessing to heal." The waiter hovered nearby. Celine gave a nod. He stepped in, Bron took the hint. As he stood, she added, "You don't get access to the version of me you ignored." He paused. "Is that what he gives you?" he asked. "Access? No," she said. "He gives me space." I gave myself access. He left without finishing the glass of water he never drank. She didn't watch him go. Instead, she reopened her sketchbook. A single page, blank, clean. Then, line by line, she began to draw a chair. Just one, facing no one, fully occupied. Celine walked quietly along the river, the cafe behind her, Bron far behind her, and a strange peace building with every step. The conversation hadn't gone badly, but it hadn't needed to happen at all. And that was the part that sealed it for her. She hadn't cried, hadn't trembled, hadn't begged. She wasn't seeking revenge or forgiveness. She was simply done. A light breeze tugged at her scarf as she neared the Pont des Arts again. This time, Kalen was already there. He wasn't waiting in that eager, impatient way. He leaned over the railing, sketchbook in hand, pencil dancing slowly across the page. He hadn't seen her yet. She paused a few feet away, watching him. How he looked calm without trying to. How he fit into the scene like he wasn't visiting. Like he belonged. He sensed her before she spoke. "I didn't mean to interrupt," she said. "You didn't," he replied without turning. "I was just sketching light." She stepped beside him, and only then did he look up. Something flickered across his eyes, the way people look at someone who's returned from a war, even if they're not bleeding. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded. "I'm not shaken." He gently closed the sketchbook. "You want to walk? Please." They moved slowly, shoulder to shoulder, saying little at first. Then she spoke. "I saw him tonight. He asked to sit. I let him, only for a minute, and I told him I wasn't his anymore." Kalen looked ahead, lips pressed slightly. Not in judgment, just listening. He asked if I was with someone. "Are you?" he asked, tone low and patient. Celine glanced at him. "I don't know," she said, "but I'm definitely not with him." They turned toward Rue Saint-Honore. Streetlights painted long shadows across the path. Celine slowed, reaching for a stone wall, letting her fingertips brush the texture. "He used to talk like I was a gift," she said, "and then he lived like I was furniture." Kalen's jaw shifted slightly, but he said nothing. "I'm not saying that for pity," she added. "I didn't take it that way. I'm saying it because for the first time, I don't feel like I have to apologize for taking up space." He nodded slowly. "That's what I see when I look at you." "What?" "A woman who no longer waits for permission to exist." They stopped beside a bookstore window, light pouring onto a stack of weathered poetry books. He turned toward her. "Can I ask you something?" She nodded. "Why did you say yes to me the first night we met? Why let me sit?" Celine thought for a long moment. "Because you weren't trying to distract me from my pain. You were just willing to sit near it." He didn't speak for several seconds. Then, softly, "If I ever overstep that, you'll tell me?" She looked up at him, eyes steady. "Yes. And I'll do it kindly." He smiled. "That's more than fair." They walked until the traffic softened, until the sky turned deep indigo, until her pulse settled so low she felt like she was floating. When they reached her hotel, he paused. "You want me to come up?" She looked at him, no hesitation. "I want you to keep being patient." He nodded. "I will." And then, without asking, without assuming, he took her hand, not possessively, not to claim anything, just to hold it. She let him. They stood like that for a moment longer. Then he let go, turned, and walked off into the night. And she walked back inside, holding onto the feeling of being seen without being owned. The plane touched down at JFK under grey skies. Celine had slept the whole way, not deeply, but steadily. Her return to New York didn't feel like a step backward. It felt like pressing resume after pausing long enough to remember who she was. The city greeted her with its usual rhythm. Impatient horns, short greetings, sharp turns through traffic. She didn't flinch. She didn't dread it. She didn't rush. This wasn't the place she had been broken. It was the place where she had once gone invisible, but not anymore. Her driver didn't speak much. She appreciated that. Outside her building, the doorman opened the car door with a cheerful, "Welcome home, Mrs. Hargrove." She gave him a small smile and nod. Inside, everything looked untouched. Same scent, same flowers she hadn't watered, same curated coldness Bron liked to call minimalism. Her suitcase rolled softly across the hardwood. She didn't unpack right away. She walked to the bedroom, opened the closet, looked at the row of designer heels she hadn't worn in months. The silence didn't press on her this time. She walked back out, opened the drawer beside the kitchen counter, pulled out a thick folder labeled Linton Cass and Rowe, estate and marital agreements. She placed it flat on the counter, opened it, breathed, then picked up the phone and dialed. "Hello, Laura," she said. "It's Celine Hargrove. I'd like to move forward. Quietly. No press, no delays." Her lawyer's voice came clear and steady. "Are you sure?" Celine looked around the space. At the massive dining table she never ate at, at the wall of framed magazine covers Bron insisted on hanging near the den, at the cold lighting, the stainless steel, the echo in her own home. "I'm sure." The next morning, she signed the papers in Laura's office. The room smelled like fresh ink and polished wood. No drama, no shock, no crying. The assistant brought in tea. Celine didn't touch it. She read every word of the documents again, not because she had doubts, but because this moment deserved her full attention. When it was done, she handed the pen back and folded her hands on her lap. Laura looked at her gently. "Would you like me to notify him?" Celine nodded once. "Yes." "Afternoon. And press? No statements. I want silence. Let his team scramble first." Outside, the city moved fast. Celine didn't. She walked 3 blocks to a small cafe she used to frequent before her marriage became a headline. The barista remembered her name, asked if she wanted her usual. She did. Black coffee, honey on the side, a warm roll. She sat by the window, watched pedestrians go by. She didn't refresh her phone. She didn't scroll. She didn't wait. At 12:17 p.m., a text came through. "Bron, I just got a call from your attorney. We should talk." She locked the screen and finished her coffee. That evening, she returned to the penthouse, took down the wedding photo in the hallway, wrapped it in a towel, set it in a box, not from rage, not from regret, from understanding. That part of her life was a room she'd now closed. She didn't need to slam the door. She just didn't live there anymore. Celine stood in front of the mirror, the evening sun stretching gold over the counter. She had always thought mirrors were cruel when your heart was tired. But today, her reflection wasn't tired. It was focused. The ring was still on her hand. Not for sentiment, not for regret. It simply hadn't been time. But now, she slipped it off. Not fast, not with fury. Just firm fingers, a deep breath, and one soft rotation. She placed it in a drawer she never opened, closed it gently, and walked away. Bron called again at 4:03 p.m. She didn't answer. The voicemail was short. "Celine, I think we should talk before this goes further." She didn't listen to it twice. There was nothing to talk about. She didn't need him to understand her decision. She didn't even need him to agree. She had already walked through Paris without looking back. Now she was walking through her life, in her own city, in the same way. At 6:15 p.m., she changed into a simple cream blouse and black pants. Her heels were low. Her purse was light. The studio building she'd rented stood on West 13th. She'd signed the papers months ago, before she knew she'd actually use it. She stepped out of the elevator and turned the key. The door opened to 900 square feet of wood floors, exposed beams and possibility, white walls. Bare bulbs, no furniture, just light. She walked slowly to the center and stood still. No Bron, no press, no audience, just purpose. A knock came after 10 minutes. She opened the door. It was Miri, her interior architect. Young, sharp, with floor plans rolled under one arm and a leather notebook in the other. "You ready?" Miri asked. Celine stepped aside. Finally, they unrolled the sketches on the floor. A main gallery wall, a sketch corner with natural light, floating shelves, a reception table, a reading nook. Not trendy, not stiff. Just, "Celine, do you want this to feel like a business or like a retreat?" Miri asked. Celine looked around. "Both," Miri smiled. "Then we design for both, and we build it with intention." For an hour, they walked the space, discussed layout, budget, timeline, paint samples, wood grains. Celine didn't yawn once. She didn't check the clock. She felt something she hadn't in a long time. Invested. At 8:09 p.m., her phone buzzed again. Not Bron this time. Kaylin made it back safely. "Still thinking about what you said yesterday. You sounded free." She stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "Celine, I meant it. I still do. Kaylin, let me know when I can see that studio." She smiled, but didn't rush a reply. Some parts of her life were finally hers again, and she wasn't letting anyone walk in unless they earned the invitation. She stood once more in the center of the room before she left, closed her eyes, and said out loud to no one, "This is where I begin." The bell above the studio door hadn't been installed yet, so when it opened at 10:42 a.m., Celine heard it, the clean pull of the handle and the shift of air. She didn't look up immediately. She wanted to finish the line she was sketching, a light study of a curled hand in charcoal. Delicate, soft, purposeful. Her fingers moved fast but with control. Then she set the stick down and turned. Kaylin stood just inside the door, holding a white to-go cup in one hand and a small brown box in the other. "I come bearing caffeine and apology," he said. "For?" she asked. "Not texting back last night. Got caught up in edits." She nodded slowly. "You're here now." "I am." He held out the cup. "No idea if you still take oat milk and nutmeg." She smiled. "You remembered." He handed it over, then set the box on her clean desk. "Cinnamon rolls. From Stella's. I love those." "I know." He didn't walk around, didn't scan the walls like a critic or a man making conversation. He stood still, like someone waiting to be let in. Celine took a sip and set the cup down, then motioned toward the left wall. "Come see." Kaylin followed quietly, not talking, not touching anything, just watching the way she pointed at corner shelves and light strips and textured paints. "I didn't want it to feel sterile," she said, "or like I was trying too hard. Just somewhere people could breathe." "You succeeded," he said softly. "I can breathe here." She walked toward the back, where the shelves were being measured. He followed, hands in his pockets, gaze steady. "You know," he said, "I expected you to fall apart after Paris." She turned. He didn't mean it cruelly, just plainly, like a man who knew how it felt to break open. "I did fall apart," she said, "but not in the way people expect. There were no screams, no burned dresses, no wine-stained rugs." He waited. "I packed my things, booked a different hotel for the last night, flew back early, sat on the floor of my apartment and listened to Nina Simone for 2 hours. And then I showered, and I didn't answer a single one of his calls. There was silence between them, but not the kind that itched, the kind that settled, the kind that felt earned." Kaylin walked toward one of the drawings on her pinboard. A half-finished figure. The strokes were heavier than her usual work. "Yours?" he asked. She nodded. "Looks angry." It was. "I didn't throw it away, though. I'm learning not to be ashamed of the parts of me that didn't take the high road right away." He smiled gently. "That's fair." They sat down on the floor, legs crossed, coffee cups nearby. Light flooded in from the high windows, casting sharp lines across the unfinished floorboards. Kaylin reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded slip of paper. "Can I show you something?" She nodded. He handed it over. Celine opened it. It was a printout of a story draft, short fiction, 2 characters, a woman who builds a quiet life after betrayal and a man who doesn't. Try to fix her, just shows up again and again, respecting the rhythm she sets. The last line read, "He never asked her to heal faster, only asked where she wanted the next brick placed." She folded the paper slowly. "This character," he shrugged. "You inspired her." Celine blinked once. Then again. "I didn't know I had that effect on you." Kaelan didn't look away. "You've always had that effect. Even before you knew." Outside, a siren passed on the avenue. A dog barked from one of the apartments above. But inside the studio, everything held still. "Would you want to share this piece at your opening?" she asked. Kaelan raised a brow. "You'd include my work?" "I'd include anything that doesn't ask women to shrink." He smiled slowly. "Then I'm honored." They sat for another hour. He didn't talk about Bron, didn't fish for gossip, didn't suggest what she should do next. Instead, he asked about her lighting plan, her brand name, the day she'd choose for the soft launch. She told him everything. And in that telling, she realized something. She liked how she sounded around him, like she believed in her own voice again. At 12:11 p.m., he stood. "I should go. Don't want to take your whole day." Celine walked him to the door. Before he opened it, he looked at her. "I want to be clear, Celine. I'm not here to fill space, or be the rebound, or stand in anyone's shadow. If I'm here, it's because I respect what you're building, and because I want to help protect it, not own it." She nodded slowly, eyes locked with his. "I hear you. Do you believe me?" "I'm learning to believe myself first, but yes. I believe you." He stepped out. She watched the door slowly close, but she didn't lock it. Not this time. Not for him. The gallery lights dimmed to amber as the room began to fill. It wasn't the grand opening yet, just a private showing for a few critics, collectors, and friends. But it mattered. Celine stood by a piece she'd titled "Frame Without Permission." It was stark, powerful, a woman seated in a carved chair, eyes forward, hands unbound. The silence in the room said everything. She'd struck something. A woman from one of the magazines approached. This feels like someone who's done hiding." Celine gave a small smile. "She is." Near the back, Kaelan stood quietly, holding a glass of club soda. He wasn't mingling. He was watching, guarding the perimeter in his own way. When she glanced over, he gave a nod, just enough to let her know, "I'm here if you need." At 7:52 p.m., the door opened. Bron stepped in, alone, no entourage, no cameras, just his usual arrogance, dressed in charcoal and nerves. Celine's posture didn't change. She finished her conversation with a curator and made her way toward the wine table. She wasn't running, but she wasn't going to play into his entrance either. Bron found her by the third wall panel, where her black and white portrait sketch, Held Breath, Held Truth, was displayed. Celine. She turned. The room quieted a little, not frozen, but aware. "Bron," he took a breath. "I didn't expect you to look this good tonight." She said nothing. "I deserve that," he added quickly. "I know. But please, hear me out." She waited. "I was wrong. I lost the only woman who ever stood by me without needing my name. I thought I needed power, but I needed peace. And that peace was always you." Someone nearby choked softly on their drink. Kaelan took a step closer, not interrupting but clearly watching. Bron didn't notice. "I want to fix things," Bron continued. "We could go away. Maybe try again. You've always had grace, Celine, and I need that in my life." Celine didn't raise her voice, didn't cry, didn't ask him why now. She simply asked, "Do you know what this exhibit is called?" He hesitated. "No. Permission withdrawn. Every piece here is what I created after I stopped asking for approval. After I stopped waiting to be seen." The silence thickened. "I don't hate you, Bron, but I don't owe you my softness anymore." She gestured toward the painting behind her. "You gave me 1,000 reasons to fade. Instead, I turned the spotlight inward. Bron tried to hold her gaze, but he faltered. "What happened between us will live in memory," she said. "But that's where it stays. It doesn't get to re-enter the present just because you're lonely." Bron opened his mouth again, but she raised her hand lightly, not to hush, but to end. "I wish you healing, Bron. But not in my orbit." She turned and walked past him. Not rushed, not triumphant. Just done. The room stayed still for 3 full seconds. Then applause, quiet at first, then fuller, rippled through the guests. Not for drama, but for dignity. Kalen didn't approach right away. When he did, it was with no questions, no praise. Just a glass of still water and a folded napkin. "You didn't flinch," he said. "I'd already let go," she replied. Later that night, when the lights were out and the guests had gone, Kalen stayed behind to help clean. As he picked up a stray glass and set it near the sink, he glanced at her. "I meant what I said before. I'm not here to own your light. I just like standing near it." Celine didn't answer right away. She walked to him, stood in front of him, and for the first time reached for his hand. Not as a symbol, not as a rescue, but as a choice. His fingers curled gently around hers. And for once, she didn't feel like a woman proving herself. She felt like one finally choosing what made her feel whole. 2 years later, the coffee shop smelled of nutmeg, ink, and wet coats. Atlanta's winter hadn't come to bite yet, but the wind carried a warning. Celine sat in the corner booth, sketchpad open, pencil tucked behind her ear. She wasn't here for the coffee. She was waiting. A new artist she was mentoring had asked to meet. 22, recent art school graduate, full of questions and insecurities, just like she once was. Now, people came to her. They called her the woman who said no to Bron Edevan on record. They called her the exhibit that roared without sound. They called her what they never used to, Celine Wilde. Her name, not his, not attached to a man's shadow. The bell above the cafe door jingled. It wasn't the mentee. It was Kalen. He carried 2 books and a scuffed leather bag. His hair had a streak of grey now, barely there, but enough for her to notice. He spotted her, smiled, walked over. "Still keeping the same corner table," he said, sliding into the booth without needing permission. "I like the view," she replied. "Window or the power seat?" She shrugged. Both. They'd never moved in together. They didn't need to. Sometimes he stayed over, sometimes she did. But the foundation between them was never about possession. It was about witness, space, consistency. "You look at peace," he said, sipping from her untouched cup. "I am." She meant it. There were no secrets left, no internal wars, no more defining herself by the worst day of her marriage or the hardest nights in Bron's silence. She had rebuilt her name, not with noise, but with presence. The mentee, Kara, finally arrived 10 minutes later, breathless with apology. Kalen took the hint, gathered his books, and gave Celine's shoulder a gentle tap before leaving. "You're going to do well," he whispered to her before walking out. He wasn't talking about Kara. The meeting lasted an hour. Kara was bright, nervous, brilliant in the messy way beginners often are. Celine offered feedback, encouragement, and one rule. Don't wait for the world to tell you your work is good. Decide that it is. Then improve. That afternoon, she walked through her neighborhood. No bodyguards, no husband's car, no whispers, just wind. She stopped by a florist's stand. The woman running it blinked. "Wait. I'm Celine," she said warmly. The woman grinned. "My mother cried at your second gallery showing." Celine smiled. "Tell her thank you." She passed a bookstore. In the window, her face was on the cover of a biography someone else had written. Lines between the frames, the Celine Wilde story. She hadn't wanted a book, but when she read the manuscript, she realized it wasn't about her past. It was about her turning point, and the way people needed permission to start again. Later, at home, she sat in her small studio, not the gallery downtown, just her personal one. The walls were lined with work in progress, unfinished, vulnerable, honest. A piece stood in the center, a charcoal sketch, A woman, not seated, but standing, hands at her side, face toward the viewer, untitled. Celine didn't know if it would ever be shown. Some pieces weren't meant for the world. Some were just for survival. Her phone buzzed. A text from Bron. She still had his number blocked, but the occasional attempt got through via email or secondary lines. This one read, "Congratulations on the gallery's 3rd year. I saw the piece in the journal. It's beautiful. You always were." She stared at the message for 10 full seconds, then deleted it. No reply. A knock at the door broke the quiet. She checked the time. It was early evening. No scheduled visitors. She opened it. Kalen stood there, paint smudge on his shirt, carrying a tray of takeout and a small second-hand vase filled with 3 tulips. "Thought you might have forgotten to eat." "I did." He entered without asking, because that was the difference now. People didn't knock to take from her anymore. They knocked to bring peace. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the studio windows. Kalen had stayed the night, but not in her bed. He never assumed. He never rushed. She found him on the studio floor, sitting cross-legged, coffee in one hand, one of her older sketches in the other. "This one," he said without turning, "still wrecks me." She stepped beside him. It was an old charcoal portrait, drawn when she still lived in Bron's penthouse, back when she was silently breaking. "You were trapped when you made this," he added, "but it still showed light." She leaned down and whispered, "Because, even in a cage, I knew the door would open one day." Later that week, she walked into her gallery, not for a meeting, but for herself. 3 years of growth, 4 solo exhibits, 2 full-time curators, 6 local artists mentored, 1 mural program in underfunded schools. Her name was now tied to restoration, art, community, not scandal, not wealth, not Bron Edevan. She stood before her most recent installation, 12 panels, each representing a month of emotional recovery. They weren't labeled with words. They didn't need it. Viewers walked through the exhibit slowly, some with tears, others with quiet smiles. One man touched the edge of the 3rd panel and murmured, "That was the month my wife left. I remember this feeling." Art didn't need explanation. It needed honesty, and hers had it. A woman approached her near the lobby. She wore a plain coat and nervous eyes. "Are you Celine Wilde?" "I am. My daughter watched your interview on PBS. She was in a toxic marriage. You gave her the courage to leave." Celine didn't blink. "How is she now?" "She's free." They hugged. No cameras, no applause. Just healing, passed down like warmth from one soul to another. That evening, Celine returned to her neighborhood studio and picked up the untitled sketch again. The woman in it stared forward. This time, Celine saw something different in her eyes. Not pain, not endurance, but peace. She named the piece "No Need to Knock," because real love, real freedom, never demands to be let in. It arrives with gentleness and waits. If you've ever had to rebuild after betrayal, if you've walked away from silence, from secrets, from anything that tried to dim your light, know this: you are not broken. You are not what happened to you. You are the story after. If Celine's quiet strength spoke to you, share this story with someone who needs that same fire. Comment with the moment that made you feel seen. And subscribe, because here on Mr. Charles Stories, we tell truths that don't need to shout. They just need to be heard.